Hello everyone, it's Shane Kanto, your Wasteland Reviewer. Welcome to the Wasteland, my weekly show where I take a deep dive into a particular film, and we're moving all along into 1934 on our journey through John Ford with the Lost Patrol and my buddy Griff. Griff, thank you so much for coming on.
Shane, thank you so much. Always a pleasure being on your show.
Absolutely. And before we get to our feature film, for those who haven't tuned into the show before, we have three segments. We have our coming attractions for a special Thanksgiving week, and then we have our Lost Patrol discussion, and then we have some recommendations for you all to leave with. Now, for the coming attractions, there's one big movie that's really coming out for this Thanksgiving outside of the world of Disney. And Griff, what film is that, and why are you excited about it?
Well, I'm really looking forward to Napoleon because I've always really enjoyed learning about researching military history, and I'm really excited to see Joaquin Phoenix's take and Ridley Scott's take on Napoleon Bonaparte.
Absolutely. This is also my most anticipated. There's a mix of things. Like, there's a couple of Netflix's award season releases getting some limited releases this week, specifically Maestro and Leave the World Behind, getting some streaming films like A Good Burger 2 coming your way on Paramount Plus. But it really is, Napoleon's definitely the one that I've been most excited about. I love the trailers. They've really gotten me excited.
Mhm.
I'm really hoping this is more The Last Duel versus House of Gucci. Uh, because Ridley Scott had two big movies come out within a month of each other 2 years ago. And I'm really hoping that Napoleon, because like I love The Last Duel, and I'm really hoping that this captures that historical epicness. Certainly looks so. And you also have one of the best actors in the world right now, Joaquin Phoenix, starring in it. So it's a lot to be excited about.
I didn't get the chance to see The Last Duel. I always wanted to see it. I haven't gone around to it yet, but House of Gucci was really good.
Oh, that is such a crazy movie with a lot of crazy accents.
Yeah,
Looking
crazy
at
story.
you, Jared Leto, and your Super Mario voice.
Right.
Oh my God. I it's Ridley Scott's such a great director, but he is such an interesting character. Basically telling historians to go get a life and to go
Yeah,
F off when they
yeah,
talk
I
about.
read that interview. Yeah,
I'm just
that was
like,
amusing.
it's like cranky old man screaming at sky at this point. And just like, this is what happens when all the actors are on strike and you have to have Ridley Scott do all the promotion for the movie. He's
Right,
just not
right.
about it. And also, probably wasn't the best idea to cast Joaquin Phoenix for promotion either, because he's not exactly the most comfortable in social situations. I can only imagine an interview with him and Ridley Scott trying to promote this movie. Oh my God. But alas, it's here, so we could go check it out this week. I definitely will be seeing it in a theater. I'm definitely not waiting for whenever the hell it comes to Apple TV Plus. So
Yeah, same. Definitely a theater for me.
we'll be watching it on a big screen on Thanksgiving evening. So boom, there it is. Now, getting into our feature film for this week, The Lost Patrol. Before I get into my show notes, I think Griff has a little bit of show and tell.
When I first heard of the Lost Patrol, it was in that movie book, I Have Videos Best, which was actually the first book about movies that I ever owned. And when I read the story, I thought to myself, I definitely have to see this movie. And at that time, they weren't running it on TCM or any of the other movie channels. So eventually I bought the DVD with, think you can see it here.
Griff, I think if you hold it right in front of your face, I think it'll actually work.
try to get a clear
Ah, darn
shot
it.
of it.
Oh,
Yeah.
we got a bit. There we go.
Okay,
There's the
good.
Lost Patrol.
Yeah, and I watched it and I loved it. It was everything that I thought it would be. It's a fantastic story of survival and resiliency and even camaraderie.
Absolutely. And to give a little bit of backstory here, we have this is a pre-Code War film from 1934, produced by RKO Pictures. This is based off of the 1927 novel Patrol. It has an Oscar nominated score, and boy, did it earn it.
Yes.
Because that score is so great watching this movie. This is actually a remake of a 1929 silent film and stars Victor McLaughlin and Boris Karloff, who's not a monster, actually has a face. You could see it, people. And this also inspired the Humphrey Bogart film Sahara. So this is drawing upon a lot of things, influencing a lot of things. It's a pretty impactful film. But Griff, what are your general thoughts on the film?
Well, my definitely my favorite part about this movie is that after the lieutenant was killed, the sergeant takes over, and even though the sergeant had no idea what the lieutenant's orders were, he just kept on going.
Mhm.
He was brave, he was courageous, he was resilient. Nothing prevented him from keeping on going. That's I think that's what I really like the most about the movie. And even though the sergeant and his unit was continually attacked by an unseen enemy, they still had that camaraderie.
Mhm.
Nothing held them back.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those kinds of films where towards the beginning I was like, okay, I see where this is going, and felt like it's really interesting watching films from this era because you immediately first reactions like, well, I've seen this before, and then you have to take a step back and think about, but did people then ever see this before? Because it's one of those, like, you could definitely tell this is one of those trend setting, like, isolated group of people, unknown enemy kind of setups. And as this film went on, that tension kept ratcheting up, ratcheting up. John Ford did such a great job of building that suspense. The score is that good. It is such a fantastic score. I noticed it right from the start and really brings a lot of emotion. And there's some interesting dynamics here, especially with Boris Karloff's character and this his like the themes about religion and stuff like that that he brings to the table. And he starts turning into that like completely losing their mind kind of character,
Right.
becoming a liability, becoming dangerous. And Boris Karloff acts the heck out of that role in this film.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. In fact, I was reading somewhere about the Lost Patrol that maybe part of the reason why it wasn't, as well reviewed at the time, they said it was because Boris Karloff had such an over-the-top performance.
Hey, it really stood out to me and it really worked. And he definitely set a tone for a lot of those kinds of performances in films like this. And like, it's going to sound like a weird comparison, but it's similar. Is like in Armageddon, Michael Bay's film, where it's like, yeah, it's a group of people stuck on an asteroid, and like Steve Buscemi's character like completely loses his mind and then becomes a complete liability to everybody. I'm
Mhm.
like, see, that trope had to start somewhere, and I'm pretty sure this was it. And it's one of those kinds of things where Karloff does a great job. I think McLaughlin really anchors this film with a performance that's strong, determined, and his character is so believable in his leadership in this film. And you have like the somewhat hopeful, also tragic ending that this film leads up to, and you're just like, okay, we made it to the end, but at what cost? And there's some really powerful imagery, especially of like some graves that they're there at the end of the film, and you're just like, made it, but it was a tough ride.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned Sahara, the Humphrey Bogart World War II movie. At the end of
Mhm.
that movie, they show all the graves of the people in the unit who were killed. Same thing with Lost Patrol.
Absolutely. And they didn't it didn't specifically say it was a straight adaptation, but from what I could tell, it seems like it's a strongly inspired kind of adaptation. But like you have that like unseen danger building up.
Yes.
There's one sequence like where the plane like flies in and you're just it gives you that uncomfortable false sense of hope that
Hmm.
like, oh my god, maybe they could get out of here, but then anybody who's going to land there is going to be a sitting duck.
Mm.
That particular character, that performance was so over the top and silly, like prim proper British, and he gets out of the plane and just like, well, that didn't work out, and that hit like bam, and you're just like, yeah,
Yeah,
that wasn't going to work out well.
he just walks out of the plane onto the sand, not a care in the world.
Not a care in the world, so casual. And there's a lot of great action in this. Like the challenging thing is setting up an antagonist who you never see,
Hmm.
but it's that fear that keeps mounting throughout the film because you're right, like they'll send people out and they'll never come back.
Hmm.
You'll have these bullets coming out of nowhere.
Right.
And there's that one sequence with like one of the characters is having some kind of heat stroke and like the way like the camera wobbles and everything in terms of what the shot and just really sets up such an interesting visual there. But it's also so tragic, and you're just like, well, that person's not going to be making this very far.
Mm.
But I think this film really works because it takes the time for its quieter character moments and it has the tension and it does some interesting things with its characters and all in an hour and 13 minutes. This is a lean movie and it really works.
Yeah, I think it really works too. The movie was only 72 minutes long, but yeah, John Ford did an amazing job just, packing all that into 72 minutes.
Absolutely. And I guess, Griff, is there anything else specifically that stood out to you about the film that you wanted to mention?
I think I think overall that just the camaraderie, like despite all the bad things that they were going through, the isolation, like we said before, the enemy that you never saw, where were they supposed to go, what their orders were, they still stuck together for the most part, just
Mm.
despite Boris Karloff's lunacy. Yeah, they I think they really held it together.
Yeah, and
Just that togetherness.
I think that's an important theme of the film too, in terms of because this is a military outfit and really trying to reinforce that camaraderie.
Mhm.
And like this platoon was in it together. They were in the muck
Yep.
and just trying to make it through. Little things that I wanted to bring up, especially toward about the beginning of the film, it's like you get like dropped in this desert setting that you have. There's a lot of great like wide shots of like them all on horses going across the desert and stuff like that. Very John Ford of him. And I
Mhm.
can guarantee you, those horizons were definitely not in the middle.
Right.
Because
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
boring as hell.
yeah. It goes back to that conversation that he had with Spielberg. Where's the horizon?
Exactly. But yeah, this one I would definitely recommend. So far, it's definitely up there in my top 5 John Ford films that I've watched so far for this show. And we haven't even gotten to like the big stuff yet.
Mhm.
Next in a couple months, finally reach the Searchers. So that'll and Stagecoach, that'll be exciting. Searchers isn't for like even more months, but get around to it. But yeah, those are our thoughts on the Lost Patrol. Very good, very well made, well acted action war film here. And I always like to wrap things up on this show by giving you all, our audience, some recommendations. But Griff, what's one film that you watched recently that you wanted to recommend to everybody?
Last night I watched a movie that I initially saw years ago called The Founder, where Michael Keaton plays Roy Kroc, the man who revolutionized McDonald's. And that's a very good movie. movie. I forgot how good it was, and I highly recommend that.
Absolutely. I'm a big fan. I own it. It's somewhere around here. I've loved the resurgence of Michael Keaton at this point. Such a good actor and has such great supporting turns too from Nick Offerman and John Carroll Lynch. It's a very interesting story in terms of how one man took two men's idea and knew how to profitize it and make it big and have that vision. And it's the good, the bad of the situation, but it's an interesting film to watch. So I have two recommendations. So for those slasher fans out there, I am not a huge fan of Eli Roth. I've never really been a fan of Eli Roth. I'm pretty sure the only movie of his that I've watched that I liked was The Clock with the House in it, and the house with the clock in its walls. And that's probably mostly because of Jack Black. But I did see his new slasher film, Thanksgiving, and I had a blast. Honestly, I haven't seen a slasher film have so much fun like that in a long time. And to be honest, I think it's probably going to be one of those films that a lot of people go back to Thanksgiving time to have like a crazy horror romp to it. And the opening sequence of the film is this horrible Black Friday massacre at like this big like Walmart-esque store, and it really sets the emotion, the story of the film. It has a lot of fun. It's definitely gory and bloody, but also in like a darkly funny kind of way. And I think if you really like slasher films and horror films like that, this is definitely one to check out. And one other film that I rewatched recently for one of my podcasts for Scribe Magazine is Steve Jobs. And this is such a great film starring Michael Fassbender and told in like three specific points in Jobs' life. And it just has such a great cast with Kate Winslet, Seth Rogen, Jeff Daniels, Catherine Waterston and everybody. It's just such a great film. And I was really pulling for Michael Fassbender back in 2015 for Best Actor that Leo won for The Revenant, but it was a very underseen film. I'm pretty sure it got pulled from AMC Hamilton, where I saw it after a week and a half. So if you haven't seen it, check it out.
Steve Jobs was definitely a phenomenal movie, a million times better than that Ashton Kutcher movie about Steve Jobs.
Yeah. Well, less we talk about Jobs, the better. The more we talk about Steve Jobs, the better. But yeah.
Going back to Thanksgiving, though, some of my friends are huge fans of horror movies, slasher movies, and they saw it last weekend, and they didn't love it, but they didn't hate it either. They were like, in the middle of it. Like, it wasn't great, it wasn't terrible either. See it if you're a horror fan, but don't expect too much from it. That was their attitude about it.
I really feel like it's the kind of film that like this isn't gonna it's not gonna get you to like, oh my god, I might love slasher films now. But like if you really like that like campy, crazy kind of slasher flick, it's like it's that. It certainly is. And there's fun to be had with it. And I think it made a pretty decent, well, it made I think $12 million on its opening weekend. I don't know what the budget was, but like seems pretty good for a pretty tiny film based off of a fake trailer from Grindhouse that came out with Tarantino, Robert Rodriguez. So it turned out pretty darn good for that kind of origin. So, but those are our thoughts and some recommendations for this week. But Griff, thank you so much for coming on to Welcome to the Wasteland.
Shane, thank you so much. Always a pleasure. And one more thought about Lost Patrol. I highly recommend it to anyone who's a fan of war movies, the military history, even thrillers. I highly recommend it to those three groups.
Absolutely. It definitely hits on all of those points very, very well. And it's an hour and 13 minutes, which is a nice selling point too. But thank you all out there for always tuning in and supporting your Wasteland Reviewer.